So our final speaker for the morning before we send you off to workshops, I'm really excited to welcome Dr. James Doty to the stage. He was here as a participant last year, and it was really great to have him, and I'm really glad to have him here also to follow up from Diana's talk about compassion, because that's something really important that we can all practice together. So he's the founder and director of CCARE, a Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education, who's one of the founding benefactors is His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And he's also a professor of neurosurgery at Stanford, so he's got a lot going on, and he's going to share with us how important the skill of compassion is as a leader. So I want to welcome to the stage Dr. James Doty.
Wait, keep playing. We had Stairway to Heaven there for a minute. You know, it's really a joy to be here. Ginny, thank you so much. Diana, that was actually an extraordinary presentation, which concisely actually explained in part what I'm going to talk about. So, as noted, I'm a professor of neurosurgery at Stanford. I also actually have been an entrepreneur. I was CEO of a company that went public some time ago, and I founded this center. And I want to tell you, why did I found this center, which studies the neuroscience of compassion and altruism. And the reason is because I had a very challenging childhood that included drug abuse, poverty, depression, mental illness. And from that, I always wondered, what is it that drives people to be good, and what is it that causes them to not see the pain of others and reach out? And that's why I started the center. And you know, the reason, at least, I was going to use the sign Stairway to Heaven is because it's a metaphor. And it's a metaphor of what leaders intuitively know or have learned through experience, and oftentimes experience that's extraordinarily painful. Because a leader does a couple things. One is he allows for transcendence, for growth, for you to find out who you really are, and to be supportive of you becoming your best self. Would you agree that an ideal leader would have those characteristics? The other thing about a leader is that he creates eminence, not eminence as in the Pope, eminence in the context of creating the environment that surrounds you, that allows you to grow and gives you the tools to do so. Now, I want to do a little exercise here first before I really get into some of these things. For a few minutes, maybe not a few minutes, maybe how about 43 seconds, I would like each of you to just sit, to close your eyes, to take a few breaths and slowly let them out. And while you're doing this, I would like you to think of that person who in your life gave you unconditional love and acceptance. And just sit with that. And feel what that's like. How does your body feel when you're surrounded by love, unconditional acceptance, lack of judgment? And you feel that warmth surrounding you, don't you? You feel like you have nothing to be afraid of. You feel that you don't have to keep that shield up that says you have to protect yourself all the time or that you have to be fearful. And we can slowly open our eyes and come back. Most people think they're doing well, and we were talking about the line and being above and below the line. That line, though, can be fairly thick, and a lot of people live there. When I was talking about the song Stairway to Heaven, which started but was drowned out by the applause, which I appreciate, heaven is a place, isn't it, where you have acceptance, where you have love, where you don't have fear. Because what stops each of us from being our best selves? It's fear. It's a feeling that we're not accepted. It's a feeling that we have to protect ourselves. How many of you are familiar with the Aristotle project that Google did? Right? You know, they didn't have to spend whatever it was, what, $20, $50 million to find that out? They could have come to me and I could have answered. And I would have only charged 10. What we know from neuroscience, and I do a lot of neuroscience, because what I have found and what I understand is that when you give compassion, and compassion means recognizing the suffering of another with a motivational desire to alleviate that suffering. When you're able to give compassion to another, when you're able to give compassion to yourself, then your physiology works at its best, and guess what? You're above the line. You are becoming self-actualized. You're becoming transcendent. And do you know the amazing thing about that? Everyone around you knows it. Because when you act in that fashion, when you're able to be there, to be present, to have the right intention, people have the ability to interpret that in a microsecond. How many of you have been in a meeting and the person who's leading the meeting walks in like this? How does that make you feel? Does that make you feel you want to contribute? Does it make you feel accepted? Does it make you feel your ideas are worthwhile? But what if he comes in going, hey guys, listen, this is great. I'm so glad you people are here. You are my team. You make things happen. Every one of you has contributed to our success, and I can't wait to hear what your ideas you're going to give me today that are going to help us be even more successful. Is there a difference there? You know, it's funny, when I applied to med school, and I have to be honest with you, I had a very challenging background, and I was flunking out of school, but I had this dream that I wanted to go to medical school. But my grade point average wasn't even close. And there was a committee that would interview you and judge you and give you a letter. And I went to make this appointment for that committee to meet with them. They refused to give me an interview because they said it was a waste of everyone's time. So I said, I'm not leaving until you give me an appointment. And they did. And the joyous thing was that I got to walk into a room with 3 people sitting like this. And they took my file, and the guy in the middle, and this was a guy, he took it and he threw it on the desk, and he said, say what you have to say because you're never going to medical school, and this is a waste of our time. And I have to tell you that fortunately, because of some tools that had been taught to me as a child, I had the fortitude to say, what right do you have to judge me? I am not a piece of paper. I am a human being. And you see, this is what happens. We get judged often on information that's either not correct, not true, or no one has taken the time to understand who we really are. How many of the people in this room have been fearful, scared at work, scared of being judged, scared of not being good enough? Anybody? You know, I gave a talk at the University of Edinburgh at the business school recently. I said, how many of you feel that you are being shown compassion at work? It's 150 people. Do you know how many? And this is sad, because we are having an epidemic of stress, anxiety, depression, and this has a huge cost in lack of engagement by employees, increased human resources cost, increased healthcare costs. And how do we solve that problem? And you know, I asked you a little earlier to close your eyes for a second and think about that person who has given you love. Unconditional love, has accepted you even with every one of your flaws. And how does that make you feel? Because you see, love is how you stay above the line. Love is what allows you to look at another person and understand that oftentimes, even when they're angry, when they appear to be unjustifiable in their behaviors, love is what allows you to see them and understand that it may not even be about the conversation you're having. It may not even be about you. And it allows you to pause before you respond. That's what love does. You know, I study compassion. And it's interesting because compassion is what extinguishes fear. Fear is what causes us not to be our best selves. And it was interesting, we saw it below the line. Below the line is fear behavior. Below the line is stimulation of what we call your sympathetic nervous system. This is your flight or fight response. This is the place where you shut down. You're not open. You don't think there are enough resources. And it causes you to close yourself in. And a lot of people live there. Compassion, when you sit and you understand who you are, that it's okay to not be perfect, that it's okay to have fear and anxiety sometimes. I mean, how many of you hear a voice in your head that says, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough? Anybody ever have that? When you shift, and you can shift, and there are a variety of techniques that allow you to do that. One of them is meditation. At Stanford, we've created a compassion cultivation training program. What it does is it allows you to shift from this fear mode that oftentimes is a natural state that we don't even know we're going into because that's how we're wired sometimes. We can actually shift over to this state of being more compassionate, looking at the world in a different way, having a different perspective, because that's what it's all about. You know what happens sometimes is that we see an event occur, and the way we process that event, it's not the event that we're processing. We think our memories are photographs. Our memories are black and white pictures that we paint with the emotional state that we have at the time they occur. That's what we put into our memory, and when we bring that memory forward, what do we get? We don't get the picture, we get the emotional content. And the point is that when you shift over and understand these are just events, you try to separate out your emotional content that you apply to it, it starts changing things. And then, when you shift to being compassionate, what happens is a physiologic event occurs. You shift from your sympathetic nervous system to your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest mode. And that's a simplification of it, but you know what happens when you're able to get into this mode? Your executive control function works much better. Your decision making is much more discerning. You have access to memories, experiences that allow you to be more creative. You go from being, have you ever heard of presenteeism? Have any of you been at work and been present but not been present? This is called disengagement at work, right? It allows you to be engaged. It allows you to be present. And do you know what miraculously also happens with that? Your physiology works at its best. Because as human beings, we evolved as a species because we have theory of mind, abstract thinking, complex language. For our offspring to survive, they have to model our behavior for over 10 years, 15 years in some case, to learn how to behave. And mothers, parents, caregivers, they are acutely attuned to the suffering of another. And we as humans are that. How many people, like we saw some people's voices break as they were talking, how many of you wanted to reach out and hold them? That is what happens when you're authentic, when you create a space of safety, where you're not judging, and when people trust you and don't have to be afraid. Those three things, psychological safety, caring, being authentic, showing your vulnerability, creating trust, that is what a leader epitomizes. And when you do that, that leader, I can assure you, is in the state where his parasympathetic nervous system is completely engaged, and it allows for you to engage. Your heart rate variability increases, which is a good thing. Your blood pressure goes down. Your immune system is boosted. The expression of inflammatory proteins are decreased, and believe it or not, over time, your longevity increases, all from being compassionate. I'd like to leave you with a practice that I personally use to center me, to keep me above the line, and I will tell you I am not always above the line, and in fact, my wife will immediately inform me when I'm not. In fact, she said to me one time, "They call you Mr. Compassion, well, you're an asshole." So it's true. But very quickly, and I have no time left, but I would just like to share with you a practice that I use. And I sit every morning with intention and take a few breaths, and I go through 10 letters of the alphabet. And these are based on science, and they will center you, and they will give you at least a simple set of tools that you can even use throughout the day to keep you above the line. 1, C, compassion for self and others. Be kind to yourself, because until you can be kind to yourself, until you can love yourself, it's very hard to give that to others. Recognize the dignity of every person. Practice equanimity and evenness of temperament. Don't judge immediately. So that was E. I always forget this, so I have to go through this. F, forgiveness.
Hold on. Well, you started because you said you give the letter to the beginning.
E? Oh my God, people, I'm out of time. Okay, we're going to start again. C, compassion. We're starting at C through L, okay? So we're leaving a few letters out to make this efficient. C, compassion for self and others. D, recognizing the dignity of every person you meet. E, practicing equanimity, evenness of temperament. F, practicing forgiveness. What limits us oftentimes in our interaction with others is we carry anger and hostility. It's like drinking poison and somehow think it's going to affect the other person. It doesn't. It only affects you. Forgiveness, having gratitude. So many people in their lives, instead of looking down and going, I am so grateful for everything, they look up and go, I don't have enough. Gratitude. I, have integrity and values that you live by. Those are the boundaries in which you interact, which you behave, and how others judge you. J, justice in the context of fundamental fairness towards others. K, kindness, with no other motivation than being kind. It is profound, and all contained by L, which is love. Do you know the reason I forgot H? It's humility, and neurosurgeons don't have humility. But I'm glad you reminded me. So H is for humility. All contained ultimately at the end of the day by love. And when you embrace love as the foundation for who you are, I will tell you, you will always be above the line, so thank you.